Welcome to the prophetic mirror, and this is where we look at what the Bible says. This is hosted by Remsam Homestead, and we are going through a series of messages to the Church of Laodicea, or the Laodicean church, and it is state. And my main focus has been the Christian standards in the church, and we are looking at the book by Joe Cruz called The Creeping Compromise, which is not creeping anymore, but it is running in full speed, and we have to be concerned with what is happening in our churches, our ministries, and amongst our people, because there has been a dwindling aspects in Christian standards, and it has seemed that we are trying to bury these things and putting our heads in the sand as if something was not happening, when actually we are in a crisis. We are so good when it comes to doctrinal issues, so we think, because we are increased in goods, rich and in need of nothing. But the true messenger to Laodicea says that we are poor, wretched, naked, and wanting. And Christ himself, who is the Amen, invites us to buy of him and drink from him without having money. And so the Christian standards has been something which has been ignored so much. And people think that as long as they are right with doctrines and they are praised with men, and it seems that they are doing a great job, that is a ticket to heaven. But the ticket to heaven, we are told, is having the righteousness of Jesus Christ. And we are told that it is not our spirit which is going to heaven, but the Spirit of Christ. And so we must let him in to guide us and to lead us. And that is why this issue of Christian standards is something that should be looked in so much, because it strikes at the heart of our true spirituality and our true religion. Now, we left at some point where actually we saw that ministers are lowering the standard. One, for the reason that they don't want to hurt the church members. And number two, because they don't want to be called holier than thou. And number three, it is because many preachers fear, when they are receiving donations and support from other brethren and who are not somehow living to the Christian standard, if they talk about these things, that the funding and the support will be cut off. And these were the three main reasons why actually the Christian standards are dwindling in the churches of Christ, because of these three things. And so I just want to pick it from there. And there is a statement that is made in Spiritual Gifts, Volume 2, page 284 to 285, that preachers should have no scruples to preach the truth as it is found in God's word. And what we have to do is let the truth cut. And the messenger says that I've been shown that why ministers have not been more successful, they are afraid of hurting feelings, fearful of not being courteous, and they lower the standard of truth and conceal it, if possible, the peculiarity of our faith. And she says that I saw that God could not make such successful. The truth must be made pointed, and the necessity of a decision urged. And as our false shepherds are crying peace and are preaching smooth things, the servants of God must cry aloud and spare not, and leave the results with God. And so sins really exist in the church that God hates, but they are scarcely touched for fear of making enemies. Opposition has risen in the church to plain testimony, and some will not bear it. They wish smooth things spoken unto them, and if the wrongs of individuals are touched, they complain of severity and sympathize with those in the wrong. When the church departs from God, they despise the plain testimony and complain of severity and harshness. It is a sad evidence of the lukewarm state of the church. And so you find that the reason why the church is in the state that it is in is because it is watchmen are fearing to address the real issues that are affecting this conquering state of the church. And so we saw that a revival of true godliness is needed amongst us and is the most urgent of all our needs. And a revival should be accompanied with the reformation. We cannot just say that we are being revived and there is no change in life. The great need is for courageous ministers. Joe Cruz, and I want to read what actually Joe Cruz talks about what should be done at such a time as this, as he says that sins exist in the church. And I'll pick from that point where sin exists in the church and just read out something to us. And this is a sermon for me, this is a sermon for you, that the Lord may be able to speak to us. We are told, sins exist in the church that God hates, but they are scarcely touched for fear of making enemies. Opposition has risen in the church to plain testimony. Some will not bear it, they wish smooth things spoken unto them. And if the wrongs of individuals are touched, they complain of severity and sympathize with those in the wrong. When the church departs from God, they despise the plain testimony and complain of severity and harshness. It is a sad evidence of the lukewarm state of the church. Spiritual Gifts, Volume 2, page 283 to 84. The great need is for courageous ministers who will speak boldly about right and wrong. The pastor who truly loves his flock and his God will not hesitate to call sin by its right name in every discourse. Straightforward preaching which creates concern over wrongdoing is the most genuine demonstration of true love. Such a man will weep much over their flock and with their flock, but they will not withhold the message which can heal and restore. That is what Joe Cruz says. And he goes ahead and says that Dietrich Bonhoeffer, in his book Life Together, made this significant statement. Nothing can be more cruel than the tenderness that consigns another to his sin. Nothing can be more compassionate than the severe rebuke that calls a brother back from the path of sin. A paragraph from the book Patriarchs and Prophets has influenced my own ministry, that is Joe Cruz, more than any other thing I have read outside the Bible. Its solemn message has burned in my soul from the first time I read it soon after ordination. It applies equally to parents as well as to pastors. So for me, it has double impact. And this is the passage that he's talking about. Those who have too little courage to reprove wrong, or who through intolerance or lack of interest make no earnest effort to purify the family or the church of God, are held accountable for the evil that may result from the neglect of duty. We are just as responsible for evils that we might have checked in others by exercise of parental or pastoral authority as if the acts had been our own. That is Patriarchs and Prophets, page 578. And so what we see is that we need a voice in the church. We need a voice in the church, a voice of courageous ministers who will own the sins of the church as their own sin. When we do this, then instead of pointing that so and so is sinful, we will think about those sins as if we were the ones who are committing them, and how we will like to be dealt with, or how we will pursue the path of restoration and revival and reformation in our own lives, and then look at what the Lord is speaking and then do what? Do that to the sins that exist in the church. We shall not palliate at sin as if it was something that does not concern us because it is done by other people. In fact, the sins of the church are charged upon the shepherds of the church more than even the sinners themselves. And so, if I am afraid to blow the trumpet and warn God's people for approaching spiritual danger and they are led into sin as a consequence, then I'll be held as accountable for those sins as if they were my own. I don't want to answer for sins of others. And that is why Paul says in the book of Acts that for these 3 years I have been with you, I have not withheld anything that is profitable unto thee. Now I go away and I may not meet with you, and some ravenous wolf will come in and try to stir up the church. And so what we need is a voice, a people who can own the sins of the church and see how it impacts the ministry of God. It impacts the church of God, and it impacts the growth of the church. The only way we are going to stop this worldly encroachment is to draw a line somewhere and stand on it. We can not be mixing good and bad and think we are still on the straight path of the narrow way to heaven. And so this creeping compromise that Joe Cruz saw in his days that is running in full swing, it has somehow to be put at stop. The nibbling away of our standards will continue until we master the courage to resist the first compromise. And so when you read the same book, the book Spiritual Gifts, Volume 4, page 68, Sister White says that the distance is widening between Christ and his people and lessening between them and the world. Again, she had to say in Testimonies, Volume 5, page 78, that our only safety is to stand as God's peculiar people. We must not yield 1 inch to the customs and fashions of this degenerate age, but stand in moral independence, making no compromise with its corrupt and adulterous practices. And so, when we look at the book of Romans chapter 12, we are told that I beseech you, brethren, that you may offer your bodies as a living sacrifice unto the Lord. And that this is the only acceptable service unto the Lord. And we are told that not conforming unto the patterns of this world, but being renewed your mind by the Spirit of the Lord. And so there has been a tendency to people saying that God looks at the heart and he doesn't look at the outside. But that is a very erroneous view of things. Yes, God looks at the heart and the motives and the intents of what human beings cannot see. But then we don't have to take that statement to cover up and indulge ourselves in the things we like because God looks in the inside. When the lamb was brought into the sanctuary to be sacrificed for the sins of the people, no one will raise this issue that can you check the mind of that lamb to see if it is okay, then we can be able to sacrifice it for the sins of the people. No. What the people did, what the high priest did, and this is very significant, and listen to this is very significant, that when the lamb was brought by the sinner into the sanctuary, what happened is this: the priest was able to examine the outward appearance of the lamb. Far be it that people can just do anything they want with their bodies in the outside and they say that God is looking in the inside. No. The lamb was examined in the outside to be without a defect, lameness, or without a spot. Then it was accepted on that basis for the sacrifice for the sins of the people. But that did not end everything. After it was examined like that, what happened next is that as it was sacrificed for the sins of the people, they were the inward parts that were acceptable to be taken, and again the fats and the blood as a symbol of the fats as a symbol of sin were taken out, and then the blood was taken to the veil of the sanctuary. So as they examined the outside, also in the inside there were things that were examined if they were okay, and they were taken. And not everything that was inside the lamb or the bullock were taken as food or something that the high priest could eat to bear the sins of the children of Israel. And so there is a twofold examination of the lamb, both in the outside and both in the inside. And Paul is so clear in Romans chapter 12 that offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, meaning that in the outside also do not do things that will disqualify you from being numbered amongst those who are the people of God. As God looks at the inward part where man cannot judge the motives and be able to examine the minds of the people, we can be able to look at the fruits that somebody is producing and the Christian standards that the Bible has put in place for somebody who professes Christianity. This idea that my dress, my choice, and how I appear in the outside doesn't matter, God looks in the inside, is a very deceptive statement that people actually have taken. And so, addressing the issue of the outward appearance, I'd like us to go through what Elder Joe Cruz had to say and the lowering of the Christian standard and our sisters and brothers trying just to look like the world. He goes ahead and he says this. Remember, this is the creeping compromise that is coming into the church and the lowering of the standards at the expense of having the churches full or not hurting the feelings, and the issue of not being wanted to be called holier than thou. And number 3, people just brushing the things or putting them under a rug because the people who support them or who give them financial aid will withdraw their support if these things were touched. And so Elder Cruz goes ahead, Joe Cruz goes ahead to say, is nudity modest? The dress question has probably been the most sensitive area in which to draw lines based upon biblical principle. Disagreement over definition of terms have frightened many ministers away from the subject. What is modesty and immodesty? Other concerned church spokesmen have been troubled by the angry charge of liberals that dress critics themselves are obsessed with evil minds. And so if you have to speak about immodesty in the church and people being nude, people immediately say that you are weak in your morals. How can you just lust at a woman because she is dressed badly? You hear such a statements, and we have heard them when you try to say, you women are tempters. Somebody says, no, women are not tempters. You are the one who is weak in your faith, in your morals, because you can't see a woman dressed in a certain way and keep your eyes and mind correct. No. Some have made a gross misapplication of righteousness by faith and have taken the position that any discussion of external conduct constitutes a legalistic denial of Christ's imputed righteousness. This is Joe Cruz, Elder Joe Cruz, about creeping compromises and the ministers being afraid to address these things. Does this subject merit a few specific observation? Has it been overemphasized? How many books have rolled from our church presses on the subject? No one can say that it has suffered from overexposure. Hardly a tract or leaflet has expounded on the matter, and few of our books give it any appreciable recognition as spiritual problem. And so Joe Cruz is saying the vanity in dress and nudity is a spiritual problem. It is not just something that to be ignored, but it is a spiritual problem. He goes ahead to say, but is it a spiritual problem? Listen to this statement from Testimonies, Volume 4, page 648. Passion is deteriorating the intellect and eating out the spirituality of our people. Obedience to fashion is pervading our Seventh-day Adventist churches, and it is doing more than any other power to separate our people from God. If this could be said of the dress problem over 100 years ago, what could be said about it in these days of unisex, the bikini, and what? The topless. That is what Elder Cruz goes ahead and asks. And he goes ahead and said, although the miniskirt comes and goes on the fashion scene, There will always be an element of nudity in prevailing styles that needs to be recognized as immodest and unchristian. Lest some should quibble over the word modesty, let us not try to define it precisely here, but there can be no debate over the fact that anything which hurts a fellow Christian is wrong, and certainly any kind of dress which causes our fellow men to commit sin must be classified as wrong. He goes ahead to say, then let us be honest enough to admit that the exposed human body is quite capable of stirring up sin in both thought and action. Too many have acted very naively toward this mushrooming problem of nudity. It is time to speak very plainly so that both men and women understand the true nature of this evil. Anne Lantas printed this letter in her column at the height of the miniskirt craze several years ago. And he goes ahead to quote the letter. Dear Anne Landers, here is a message from a dirty old man aged 22. I am a college senior, and the point of view I express here reflects the thinking of a lot of guys. There is nothing so ludicrous as a chick in a thigh-high mini, sitting on a chair or sofa, tugging at her skirt, trying to pull it down to cover her status of respectability. She blushes 10 shades of red and asks with eyes big as saucers, am I sitting all right, or is anything showing? If they don't want anything to show, why don't they buy a skirt with some material in it? More than once I've gotten a dirty look because I was caught popping an eyeball. Please tell the great pretenders who feign insult to come off it. The reason why they go half naked is because they want to create a little unrest. Tell them that act should have been cancelled when they accepted the hike of the hem and said to blank with decency. Many women have brushed aside criticism of their short dresses by blaming everything on the dirty old men with their evil thoughts. But is that the basic fault? Some months ago, I received a telephone call while holding an evangelistic series in the state of Texas. Listen, this is a boy. He has classified himself as a dirty old man, age 22. So he is expressing how actually, and this man is an evangelist, by the way, he is expressing himself how actually these things are causing some havoc in the church. And so this letter continues. Many women have brushed aside criticism of their short dresses by blaming everything on the dirty old men with their evil thoughts. But is that the basic fault? Some months ago, I received a telephone call while holding an evangelistic series in the state of Texas. A barber who listened to my daily radio program wanted a personal interview in my motel room. Being a Catholic, he did not feel free to attend the public service, but he indicated on the phone that he desperately needed some spiritual counsel. This man turned out to be a wonderful Christian gentleman. He spoke of his great desire to be saved and to live a godly life. Then he confided the problem. Mini-skirted women came into his barber shop day by day. He prayed and struggled to keep his thoughts pure. With tears in his eyes, he asked me, is God going to destroy me because I cannot always keep my thoughts clean and holy? Please tell me what to do. I want to be saved and I want to keep my mind upon God. But how can I do it with these half-dressed women before my eyes? Now, very interesting. The old dirty man, age 22, continued to write this letter. I felt sorry for that barber. He was wrestling with the same problem that every Christian man and boy has to face. It is not confined to dirty old men, 22 years of age. Every man, woman, and child in the world has a carnal nature by birth, but the male struggle to keep the thoughts straight is based upon more than the fleshy nature. It is rooted in the fact that God created men with a completely different sexual makeup than women. I'll try to deal with this issue of God creating man completely different in sexual makeup in one of these series, a series that we shall be talking about men and women, how they are sexual oriented. God made man in the beginning with a very sensitive sexual nature that could be quickly aroused by the sight of female nudity. Woman, on the other hand, was created with a sexual nature which will not be so easily stirred, especially by sight. She was made to be more responsive to touch and tenderness. Her more subtle sexuality could be drawn out by the physical attentions involved in the conjugal relationship. God gave man his emotional sex nature for the purpose of making marriage more pleasurable and happy. The husband was to be the aggressive one in the relationship. Under this beautiful plan of God, the sex instinct of both husband and wife could be lawfully stirred. But mark this, God never intended for man's sex emotions to be stimulated outside the marriage chamber. And in order to protect him, God placed within the woman a delicate sense of modest reserve so that she will not expose her body except to her own husband. And let me tell you this, and this is a fact whether you like it or whether you want to ignore it. Men can go bare-chested and no one will ever complain. Although that is immodesty, I'm not saying that that is okay. But men can go in a village or in anywhere not having their chest covered or having just a vest on it. And you won't hear anyone lamenting, you won't hear havoc in the village or such a stirring up of sexual emotions. But let a woman do the same thing. Let a woman go about in the village only having her vest on and her armpits uncovered and all that stuff, and you'll find immorality starting in a village. That is how God really made men and women. They are stirred up with different things. And so the makeup of a man is so different with the makeup of a woman when it comes to emotions. And for even women to think that they can dress as men and just go about being okay is something that we are trying to downplay the genders that the Lord has created. That is a man and a woman. When a woman decides that I'll be like a man, wear like men wear, and do the things that men do, actually it is downplaying the creation story and trying to overturn the emotional, physical, and relational setup that the Lord has put there when creating man and woman. And so even in dress and the appearances of men and women in public, it is something completely different. And we have seen where actually men, and I'm not saying this is okay, we have seen where men just bathes or takes their showers along the river bank, and you will never hear that there is immorality in a village. But let the women start doing that, showering themselves besides the river bank, and you will find that immorality starts rising in a village. These things really tells us that women are more sexual creatures when they are looked upon more than when men are looked upon. I'm not saying it's okay for men to be looked upon, but I'm trying to give out an idea that we can't ignore these Christian standards that are being lowered in the church, and women start calling men that they have weak morals and they dress the way they want and they do whatever they want, and then they, at the end of the day, when they are approached, they start saying, you men are weak in your morals, you are not yet Christians. Then they go ahead and say, I'll leave the church if you think my dress is bad. And this is not because they have been approached in a bad way, but because somebody has raised an issue in a very brotherly way or in a very parental way that you see the Christian standard will not allow you to be like this. But then that is where we have reached in church, that people will want to leave the church because these things are being addressed. And so the plan was perfect, but it has been broken down in one area. Satan has managed to destroy to a very great extent that inherent modesty with which the Creator endowed womanhood. Under the growing curse of transgression, we are told, women have thrown off the moral restraints. Uninhibited nudity or provocative half dress has become the accepted norm of modern fashion. On every side, the Christian as well as the non-Christian is forced to look upon scenes of nakedness which are utterly foreign to the original plan of the Creator. What has been the effect of this perverted order of things? It has produced a sex-saturated society whose moral qualities just about match those of the antediluvians. Jesus said, "But as the days of the Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." Matthew 24:37. And what were the conditions of Noah's day which will be duplicated in the end of time? Genesis 6:5 says that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. We have only to look at the sorry state of today's entertainment and communication media to know how fully this prophecy has been fulfilled. Pornography has been legitimized. The TV channels are crowded with lewd sex, either implicit or explicit. The world of advertising and even the daily news commentaries are sprinkled with profanity and suggestive double talk. The imagination of modern man seems obsessed with the subject of sex, often defiant and perverted. Homosexuality has not only received the tolerant coexistence which it sought after, but has been given recognition by the majority of psychiatrists as normal sex behavior. And what about the Christians who are surrounded by the glorification of the flesh? Unfortunately, it has not been left outside the church doors. Slowly, the world edged into the remnant church. By degrees, the sight of knees and thighs, even in the sanctuary, began to be tolerated. The sense of outrage disappears as we got used to the weekly display. And so, Joe Cruz and I lament of the benumbing of our sensibilities by allowing this creeping compromise to take over our churches for the fear of being called holier than thou, for the fear of hurting feelings and fearing that people will leave the church, and number 3, for the money that we receive from the people who don't hold up the Christian standards and will withdraw their support if these things were touched upon. We haven't come even to the issue of men and women swimming together. Far be it that we can even touch on it. And so what about the Christian men whose inherent sex nature is so easily influenced by this nudity? Do they respond to the external stimuli by thinking evil thoughts and committing mental adultery? By the grace of God, true Christians can lay hold of victory even over the imaginations of the heart. Through submission and prayer, any man can claim the power of pure mind, but the styles of dress make it more difficult and struggle. Now, I want to read you a verse that maybe I may put out of context, but I feel that the Spirit of God stirs me to put on. Think about this man, and it is interesting to talk about this man. In the book of Peter, in the book of Second Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter chapter 2, talking about the man Noah. This is what we are told. And I'll start from verse 1. Let me start just from verse 1 to give a context. Verse 4. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into the chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment. Now, verse 5 is where I should have started, And spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the 8th person, a preacher of righteousness. I want you to see this man. A preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of ungodly, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them with an overthrow, making them an ensample unto those that after should live ungodly, and delivered who? The just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them in seeing, I want you to look at that. This is a righteous man. The Bible has said that this was a righteous man. It says, for that righteous man dwelling among them in doing what? In seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. So it is possible that the sins committed by the people can make the spirit of someone be vexed, can make the spirit of man be stirred. That is what we are talking about when we talk about that through submission and prayer, any man can claim the power of pure mind, but the styles of dress make it a more difficult struggle. And so this man, Lot, had to struggle in spirit because of the things he saw and he heard. We cannot say that a converted man will not struggle with these things. They will struggle. And God has created us so as we do not be stumbling blocks to other people. In fact, that is the prayer that the psalmist makes. That is David. He talks people being offended. People being he prays that the people may not be offended. And I'll just I'll look if I can find in Psalms. Let not those who wait on thee be offended because of me. That is Psalms 25 verses 3. Psalms 25 verses 3. And I'll read it. We are told, David praying, he says this: Yea, let none that wait on thee be ashamed, let them be ashamed which transgress without cause. And so we should be praying that we should not be a stumbling block, and we should not be the means of the people we should not be the means by which the people who wait upon the Lord be stumbled or be offended. We cannot say that because brethren are Christians, they must endure the nakedness of the sisters who are saying they are also converted. We don't live for self, but we live for others. And so Jesus made it clear that men are easily led into wrong thinking. He said, Ye have heard that it was said by them of old time, Thou shalt not commit adultery. But I say unto you that whosoever looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. And so what can be said for the women who dress in such a way they stimulate this kind of thinking? They are equally guilty before God. And so for this reason, no true Christian woman who understand the effects of such a course will wear the revealing clothes which create such illicit desires. As the dress inches above the knee, the climate of sin is created. For the carnal man who has not the power of the gospel in his life, there is no chance whatsoever to resist the temptation. Every miniskirt is fuel which triggers the mind to think the most base thoughts of which the carnal nature is capable. Christian women should have no share in this kind of enticement and then make a statement that you are weak, and you are not converted, and if my dress is a problem, then I'll leave the church. Such a statement should not be heard amongst those who are waiting for Jesus Christ. And in Testimonies, volume 5, page 360, we are told that our example and influence must be a power on the side of reform. We must abstain from any practice which will blunt the conscience or encourage temptation. We must open no door that will give Satan access to the mind of one human being formed in the image of God. And because the female reaction to nudity is so different from that of men, women often minimize the spiritual problem we are talking about. Too often their attitude is that men just ought to use more power of self-control and stifle their mental images so that they may not be starred with every woman who has their dresses reaching above the thighs and their knees. They fail completely to grasp the significance of difference which God himself put in the male nature. That nature can not be resolved by any human effort or determination. It can be controlled by complete Christian commitment, but Christian women must cooperate in closing the avenues. And they should not be in the habit of leaving their cleavages, their dresses being above their knees, and leaving their armpits open for the gazing of men who are not married to them. This has nothing to do with moral weakness. This is the attitude that we should assume, that we will not be part of the Satan's plan to create problems in the church. And the Bible says that there was a man called Cain, and he had his brother Abel. And when the Lord confronted him and asked him where Abel was, Cain said, "Am I my brother's keeper?" And that is what is being repeated by others. When we don't mind the state of the spirituality of others or what affect their spiritual walk with the Lord, then what? We are saying, "Am I my brother's keeper?" We are repeating the same word that Cain said. And you know what? Cain actually killed his brother. I think these things, we have been spiritually benumbed until we don't think to that extent that we are killing our brethren spiritually. And if we kill our brother spiritually, you know what? God will put a mark of death upon us. And so our only safety is to be shielded by the grace of God every moment and not put out our own spiritual eyesight so that we may call evil good and good evil. Without hesitation or argument, what do we have to do? We must close and guard the avenues of soul against evil. It will cost us an effort to secure eternal life. It is only by long and persevering effort, soul discipline, and stem conflict that we shall be overcomers. Then the question is raised, and we have to be serious about this, with people who say that God does not look on the external but looks in the heart. The question is raised, a very simple question: will you dress like that when you appear before Jesus? If you are given a chance to meet Jesus, will you dress the way you are dressed, whether you be a man or whether you be a woman? And you hear some funny answers that come across, that Jesus met that woman caught in adultery. And while people were ready to stone her, Jesus said, "Whoever has not sinned, let him be first to cast the stone." These are the very answers that are given when sin are touched upon. So Jesus told the woman, because others were sinners and they did not stone her, Jesus told her that I cannot condemn you. And so brethren may be condemning something that Christ will never condemn in a person. Do you see how people play around with passages in the Bible? Somebody just knows that they are on the wrong, but they pull up a passage in the Bible that Christ says, "Whoever have no sin, let him be the first to throw the stone." And because they did not stone her, then we may be stoning people when Jesus Christ have let them free. Very weird way of twisting scriptures. And I'm not talking that people should be stoned, people should be thrown out of the church. I'm talking about the creeping compromise of lowering Christian standards in the church that is being palliated with for the reason people will leave the church. They don't want to hurt feelings. The reason you will be called holier than thou. And the third one, the people who have not Christian standard as their heart and they are funding this, the preachers, they will feel offended and withdraw their support. I'm not talking about raising Christian standards because they need to be raised, but not raising them for the fear of the things that will happen rather than for the fear of what the Lord thinks about them. And so this issue of quoting scriptures when we are told that this is sin is the very worst thing that can ever happen amongst us. It means that really we understand the scriptures, but we are hiding behind them. And so another case is raised that you see, we had Mary Magdalene, whom the Lord cast out 8 demons. And we hear people say, give the chance to these people. And then you hear that as long as if they are in the church, there is a possibility of them being saved and changing. But if you do something that will make them leave the church, then you will have closed the door for them to be ever saved. We have become so more courteous than Jesus Christ, and will not do what Christ tells us because we think that we have the capability of keeping people in church and sending them out. If you ever thought that you have the ability of keeping the person in church, then you must have that ability of deciding whether he goes to heaven or not. And that is a most dangerous situation because that is only papal dogmas, that they have the right to pass people into heaven and make them out of heaven, to take them out of the book of life. What I'm saying is this: we should do what Christ has told us to do, and Christ will remain with his church. It is not our duty to chase people from the church, and it is not our duty to maintain people in the church. Let the truth be the only thing that will take the people into the church and will take them out of the church. But man's devisings and plan to keep people in the church and take them out of the church is only human and not godly. And so let us not sit where Christ should be sitting and do things that thinking that we can be able to entertain people in the church at the expense of offending Jesus Christ. And so Satan is really running full swing speed into our churches, but yet we don't have power to be able to address these things because of one thing also, because we have lacked a relationship with Jesus Christ. And so we don't have to ignore the fact that Satan's final win or lose all attack against Israel to keep them from entering the promised land involved the illicit interlude at Balpeor. The immoral pagan women of Moab swarmed into the camp of Israel with breezy abandon and caused thousands of the men of Israel to fall into sin. God described the sin to thus: for they vex you with their wiles, wherewith they have beguiled you in the matter of Peor, Numbers 25:18. And so there is this belief that everyone who is coming into the church has been sent there by God. While we will not judge the motives and the hearts of the people, let us not be so naive to think that everyone who is coming in the church has been brought there by Jesus Christ. There are a lot of places in the Bible and in this message in the letters of E.G. White says that Satan also has his ways of bringing people in the church, and we should be careful and sensitive to these issues, that not all who come to the church are brought by God. Some are only taking upon the name Seventh-day Adventist when they are not interested in the Christian standards that has been really been revealed in the Word of God. And so Satan also is hurrying his people into the churches, and we should not be blind. But what should the shepherds of the churches do? They should remain faithful. They should remain faithful to the Word of God and leave the rest with God. And so we are living in a time where the Church of God is in the book of Numbers chapter 25 and being enticed to the world by the women of the world who have come into the churches and by the men of the world who have come into the churches. And so how many thousands of God's people today will be enamored and destroyed by duplication of fleshly lusts. Not one man or woman can boast of any great strength against the pervasive glamour of this worldly age. Everyone has to keep their eyes on Jesus Christ and be faithful and true to the Bible principles and stand in the truth wherein the Lord has called us to stand. And so we are told the undress parade of the latest styles of fashions. As I bring this to a close, I want us to read something that Joe Cruz says, that the undress parade of the latest styles and fashions have also breached the spiritual defenses of many in the church. Only time and eternity will reveal how many minds have surrendered to the sensual appeal of immodest clothing. We wonder if Balpior could have been any more bold in its deliberate assault on the morals of Israel than it is today in the church. And so, where did the minicloths come from, and what was the boast of the person who started them? She says in an interview that she had with one of the magazines, she says that the reason why she introduced the mini clothes, that is marijuana, is to show that a woman is a sexual creature. She displays her sexuality instead of the coy business of hiding it. Today she dresses to say, I am sexy and I like men and I enjoy life. This was her confession, and if only women knew what marijuana purpose was in introducing mini clothes, then they'll have nothing to do with it. And so can we conclude that the mass craze of nudity may be based upon modern devil possession? Do the statistics of mental and emotional sickness not support the conclusion also that great numbers of people are not really in the right mind? And these people are being exploited by what? Hollywood promoters, smart writers, lewd cultists, and weird designers. The very people who designs these clothes are demon possessed, and you might end up in conclusion saying that the same people who wear them are also like the people who designed them. Now that is a sorry statement to say. That will look like an abuse. It will look like hatred when you say that the people who wear these clothes are like the people who designed them. And what kind of moral standard or mental status they are in? They are demon possessed. And what is demon possession essentially? Demon possession is doing things instigated by Satan. That is demon possession. Sometimes we think demon possession is somebody falling on the floor and foam coming out of their mouth, someone running here and there, helter-skelter without being chased, or somebody running at night and disturbing the peace of the people. No, demon possession even is found amongst the people who are wearing suits and their ties. By the decisions they make and by their moral values and the things they speak and reflect, you can know whether people are demon possessed or not demon possessed. So we are being told that these TV castes, these Hollywood promoters, these lewd cultists and weird designers, they are demon possessed, and for surely those who clothe themselves with the things that come from them are also demon possessed. And this is a very strong statement that is made. Now, this is what he says again, that he goes ahead and says, Paul Harvey, noted newspaper columnist, cited the alarming coincidence of crime statistics and short skirts. FBI crime files reveal that forcible rape shot upward almost in proportion to the rise of the hemline. The consensus of law enforcement officers in 50 states agreed that there is a correlation between the miniskirt and sex crimes. Of the law enforcement officers who responded to the question, does the short skirt invite sex crimes? 91% answered in the affirmative. The view was summed up by the juvenile division commander of one large city when he said, some sex crimes are committed by individuals aroused by their sensory perception, and short dresses of some girls could provoke such an attack. A newspaper article from Toronto, Canada confirms that Canadian police agrees with the US report. 91% of Toronto policemen think a woman in a revealing miniskirt is more likely to be a rape victim than is her more modest sister. A spokesman from the Toronto Post said Tuesday, since 1964, the year the mini was introduced to the female fashion market, rapes have increased by 68% in the US and by 90% in England, says the law officers, a police publication. Abbreviated costumes are no doubt a factor in offenses against women, said Sergeant George Gow of Toronto Morality Squad. When a girl in a short skirt is followed by a man after she gets off a streetcar at night, there isn't much doubt as to what attracted her assailant. Dr. Luchestein, physician at Tombs Prison in New York City, worked with 170,000 prisoners over a 12-year period. He said, the so-called crimes of passions are increasing alarmingly and will continue to do so until the principal cause is eliminated. This, it seems to me, is the present style of dress, which, to say the least, is immodest. Immodest dress has a direct bearing on crime incitation, no matter how innocent the wearer may be. Lest any should conclude from this data that the male of the human species is the pawn of uncontrollable urges, let me hasten to say that every individual remains accountable to God on the basis of personal decision. Each man carries the responsibility of foreign judgment, sovereign judgment, and willful choice, providing no excuse for transgression of God's law. Finally, we stand or fall not because of the force of temptation, but by the deliberate action of the mind to obey the truth or reject it. The influence of provocative dress habitually prevails over the mind which is not fortified with the Holy Spirit. And so, Elder Cruz says that we need to, in all these temptations, in all this provocative way of dress from men and women, we should be able to submit to Jesus Christ and overcome. But then the issue is that this lowering of moral standards in the church, and more so in nudity, is something that the church has to close door to it. It may seem as if separating the tares with the wheat, but then Sister White is so clear on this issue that the door should be closed or moral harm will be done to the church. And lastly, I have to say this. This is a true story of one of the medical missionaries in Seventh-day Adventist Church back in 1870s, 1890s. And the story was being given by other medical missionaries. The name of the sister who was the medical missionary was called Sister Louise. And you can see what Sister White has to say about Sister Louise. Sister Louise was a medical missionary worker, and she was able to manage to go to slums of the USA where there was men who had corrupt senses and they were very criminal in nature. But this sister will walk in the gallows of this city and was able to preach to these men and young children and draw them to the church at the respect of these criminals. Reason being, this woman was modest and whatever she talked and did accompanied the profession of her religion. And so these criminal men respected her so much and they allowed her to work in those slums without touching her and molesting her. And she had a very successful work in those places. I'm not saying that women who are modest should expose themselves to very dangerous places. But this is a true story that was told by other medical missionaries, and they couldn't venture to go in those places. But Sister Louise was able to go there, and Sister White says that one day she was walking on the street with this lady, a young lady called Sister Louise, and when they reached at a place, those places that she used to go to, those dangerous places, they were over. First of all, there were few children who saw her and started shouting her name and started pulling her on the street. And within some few minutes, there were over 50 young children calling her name, and she wondered what was it. And she was told the story of Sister Louise and she couldn't believe it. And then she says that I looked so insignificant in the presence of Queen Louise. We want to be a people who stir people to the right direction. Even the people who are more debased, we want to stir their eyes, their morals, their mind, and their thoughts towards the right direction. And so let us know that no man lives for himself and no woman lives for herself in the present world. May the Lord bless us. May we be encouraged, and may we not do the work of uprooting or planting, but may we let the Holy Spirit do the work of planting and uprooting. We have been sent outside there not to do anything else but to win people to Christ, but not do what we call ecumenism and preach for the number, but preach for the quality. May the Lord bless us as we continue in this series of messages to Laodicea and the creeping compromise and the lowering standards that are coming in the church. God bless us, and bye for now.